Hello, and welcome to the 938 podcast. So glad you joined us today for this podcast. I'm Brian Garrison, one of the associate directors here in the BBFI mission office, and so glad to have you here with us today. Especially glad to have, in my opinion, probably the most beautiful guest that we've had on the podcast so far. I'm joined by my lovely bride of 32 years, Michelle, and welcome.
Thank you.
Hey, so glad you're here. Now, we are here to talk about a recent trip that we made to Europe. Now, we've had, over our 32 years, a lot of opportunities to travel together, do ministry together, but this is perhaps one of the, probably the highlights of our marriage. Time in Peru as missionaries, but also we had just a unique opportunity to go to Europe together and love on some missionaries. The main purpose of the trip was banking. Now, we accomplished that. God was good in providing a kind of a solution to a financial need. But more than anything, we had the opportunity to love on some missionaries, see a lot of great sights, and eat some great food. Mm-hmm. Okay? And so we'd just like to talk about our trip.
Sure.
In this podcast. So first of all, let's just kind of look at the personal aspect of the trip. We had a lot of fun, ate a lot of good food, and so let's just kind of, what were some of the highlights of the trip from a personal perspective? And I'm going to let you start.
Okay. So for me, there was just a lot of beauty to see, a lot of the rolling hills in England, and then the history that was there as well. Just so much to see in London, and a lot of fun sights. But really for me, I think one of the highlights was really getting to spend time with our missionaries. We were able to spend time with Tom and Gail Gritz, and that was a great opportunity. I'd heard about them my whole life, and so to get to spend time with them was a unique and special opportunity for me.
Yeah, and Tom and Gail pretty much hosted us while we were in England, and Tom's a big guy, and so I think that's probably how we were so effective at walking into the bank, and I guess just his presence alone was kind of what helped push it over the top, and he was a great help in working with Barclays Bank and getting some business done while we were there. So let's talk about food.
Oh, man.
Yes, had a lot of great fish and chips in England.
Yes, those were very good.
Yes.
Yeah,
they can try it here, but it's just not like eating
same.
it there. Yep.
No,
Yep.
and then also the scones and clotted cream, that was delicious. It makes me want to learn how to make it, but that was really good. And tea time, of course, we enjoyed that several times, so that was a lot of fun.
Yep.
But I would say probably the food in Italy was my favorite. Italian is my favorite anyway.
Yep.
And so we actually came back with some olive oil and some Parmesan, and I came back with this gesture, Italian food is really, really good. So that was a fun experience as well.
And they did it right. They did it right there. So like the week after we got back was our anniversary.
Yes.
And we made the mistake of going to Olive Garden.
Yes, we did.
For our anniversary dinner.
Yes, we did.
That was just so disappointing.
Yes, it was. I've always loved Olive Garden, but for some reason that time it was not. It was not as good.
Yep. So we had the opportunity to travel. We were on all modes of travel. Planes, trains, automobiles. We rode the high-speed train.
Yes.
We even rode up and down in a little trolley car in England in a little really nice, quaint village there. So that was fun.
Yes, it was.
And so what about the sites that we were able to take in? What are some of the things that stood out to you?
Okay, well, we went to the place that we did ride the trolley. That was a very quaint little town, and it was just lots of little shops and brick roads, and just very, very, very much what I would have thought England would be like. Yeah. And so it was very neat to experience that town and just walking around and seeing all the brightly colored doors and flowers everywhere. They are very proud of their entryways and take very good care of it. So that was beautiful. But also just the rolling hills with the sheep. We kept trying to find sheep and looking for those all over. And of course, a lot of England is covered up on the sides of the road with trees and bushes. And so you don't get to see as much of the countryside as you wished you would, but it was still fun to try and spot those little sheep.
Right. Spent a whole day in London.
Yes, we did.
Our missionary, BBFI missionary, Josh Bell.
Yeah, and friend.
A good friend of ours, took the time to show us around London, saw all the big sites, Big Ben, the London Tower, and just kind of everything in downtown. And then we got to spend a couple of days in Rome as well.
Yes, we
and
did.
took in all the major sites, the Trevi Fountain, the Colosseum, and even got to walk where the Apostle Paul walked into Rome on the Appian Way. Just some incredible experiences, and you know what? It was just fun to do it together.
Yeah,
it really was. But unlike you, the highlight personally would have been or was the time that we were able to spend with our missionaries.
Yeah.
We spent one whole day with some of our England missionaries that came together, treated them for pizza, and just kind of hung out and
talking life.
Yes,
you know?
absolutely. Hearing their stories, hearing about their family, and just kind of loving on them. Got to spend some time with our missionaries in Italy as well. A whole Sunday with the Pethtels, Scott and Dominique there, and just a lot of fun. But also, and this is kind of a good transition, also hearing their war stories.
Yeah.
Hearing how difficult at times European missions is, and just how they've been able to, all of our missionaries that have been there for a while in Europe, how they've been able to weather the storms basically and continue to do what God has called them to do. And so what we're going to do now is just kind of take a quick break, and I'd like you to watch this short video narrated by our own Gail Gritz on European missions.
When we came to England in the early 80s, we worked almost exclusively with the British. But today, nearly 40 years on, and our church members represent nearly every continent across the globe. Missionaries in Europe are experiencing the same thing. God is moving people here from every nation, and our challenge is to reach all these displaced people. Some come for the hope of a better life or to escape war. Others come looking for Christianity, but they all come with great need and an openness that is unprecedented. You can literally reach the world from Europe. One statistic said Europe is largely populated by people groups, of which only 2% are professing evangelicals. To be effective for the gospel, we need more than 2% actively involved. We need you. We need workers equipped and ready to help us with active outreach, intentional hospitality, and bold gospel proclamation that will draw men and women to Christ. Europeans need to know and see God's involvement, and they will see that through your life. Missionaries are on the ground doing their part, planting churches and reviving older congregations, facing the challenge of multicultural evangelism. But as Alex Cockman said, God isn't done drawing people to himself, even among populations that have historically had the gospel. But the Europeans of today have not had the gospel. They remain unreached. What could you do to meet that need?
I hope you enjoyed that video. Just a really unique look and perspective on European missions. And so let's just kind of talk about what we saw, what we felt. It was an amazing experience, personally, just fun, a lot of fun, but really what stood out in my mind, and I know in conversations since, of how it impacted you just on the spiritual, emotional level, in seeing the things that we saw, hearing the stories from our missionaries about about what it takes, just what it takes to be there for the long haul, and do what God has called them to do. So let's just kind of talk about a few things that stood out to you, and I'll let you go first.
Okay. One of the things that stood out to me was getting to worship in two of the churches that we worshiped in was such impactful because there were so many different kinds of people and groups of people. And so just praising the name of the Lord in so many different cultures there. And that was a neat experience for me. But also the amount of longevity that the missionaries have had, the work that's been put into that, and then for the some of the churches were very small, and I think that probably for them it was discouraging that their groups are so small. But I think the issue is that the people don't recognize their need for the Lord. They live in a country where things are so affluent and things are so well laid out, and their homes are beautiful, their country's beautiful, the history,
streets are clean.
The streets are clean. We had a different experience in Peru than that. And so I think for them, their physical needs are not as great, and so therefore their spiritual needs, they don't recognize their spiritual need as much. And so I think that was something that it was evident. You could see that in the works and in the church services, and just the hard work that the missionaries put in, but also the amount of work it takes just to keep going and to keep having church.
Yeah, and you mentioned kind of not recognizing the need that's there. That's kind of one of the things that stood out to me. We had both in England and in Rome, the opportunity to visit some of the old churches, like St. Peter's. Well, there's St. Peter's in England, in London, and in Rome, and we walked into both of those cathedrals, and you're in awe of the ornate buildings and the statues and the marble and impressive architecture. And just beautiful, stylish buildings that have been there for a long time. And yes, you just think of what we could do with all that money. But one thing that kind of impacted me, and I stood in St. Peter's in Rome, and they were having Mass at the time, and just stood there and wept, just thinking that here we are in really the seat of Roman Catholicism, right there, close to the Vatican, and there's this attitude of, nah, we're good, right? We have everything we need here. Not only are we, for the most part, and there are parts of Europe that are not as affluent as some of the places we visited, right? But for the good part, there is somewhat of an affluency, and we're fine physically. But here we are, we're in Rome, just the heartbeat of Catholicism, and it's the attitude of, we're okay, we're good, and we don't need what you have to share with us. Right. And that just broke my heart.
Sure.
That we without a doubt, we know what the Bible says. And that that Christ is the only way. If anybody wants to come and have a relationship with God the Father, it's only through Jesus Christ. And this idea of that's okay, that's okay, and they don't listen, and it's hard to get momentum, particularly in and around Rome. We see that there were very few what we would consider evangelical Christian churches that were of size.
Right.
And that could be, like you say, very discouraging for the missionaries that share the true gospel. Right. To feel like they have any kind of impact at all, and that just broke my heart.
Right. Yeah.
And especially for missionaries that we know that are on the ground and been there for a long time. Just we feel for them. You feel for them. And so that kind of goes along with there's apathy. You see old church buildings in many parts of Europe, but
Right.
the ones that we saw, particularly in England, as we were traveling the countryside, would see this empty church building. In London, numerous church buildings that were either vacant
Right.
or now they're a warehouse for something else, for a business. And that's just sad to me, just to see that. What else stood out to you?
Just a little bit of maybe an attitude of, towards Americans in general. They're a very proud people in both of those countries. And so they don't need anything. They don't need our money. They have their own. They have their own beautiful countryside. They have their own beautiful churches. And so what can an American coming to their country offer them?
Yeah.
And so in some places we even felt a little bit of resistance to speaking English to us. They didn't really want to speak English to us, especially obviously in Rome. And so just they've got Italian. Why would they? Why would they want to speak English?
It's the perfect language, right?
That's right. So there was a little bit of resistance to that. So I'm sure that affects the missionaries as well. What are you doing here, and why would you need to come to my country and give me something I don't need anything?
Yeah.
So that was probably the most impactful.
Now, something you mentioned, a word that you mentioned in your first answer around this was longevity. Yeah. And that's probably one of the biggest perspectives that I brought from our trip, and also from years of interacting with missionaries in parts of Europe. Is that's what it takes.
Yeah.
All of these things that we've talked around, that is the key. You have to entrench yourself in the community. You have to be there for a long time in order to be accepted. You have to take the time to learn the language.
Right.
Even in England, where they're speaking English, it's a different language. Right. Because you've got to learn how they speak their English.
Right.
And so in doing so, and taking the time and being there for the long haul, that endears yourself to those you're trying to reach. And we saw several congregations that had a consistent impact in their community. We even saw a beautiful picture of missions in the church that we attended in England on the Sunday that we were there. That work has already been handed over to a national.
Yes.
And that's the way it works. But it took many years of our missionaries, the Grits, Tom and Gail, being in that one place, and in order to be able to grow the work to where there is a national ready to step in.
Right.
And so if anything, the conversation could kind of end with that idea, that aspect of just what it takes, just what it takes for the most part, for many areas of Europe, is being there for the long haul.
Right.
And so what ideas? How would you encourage maybe our missionaries in Europe? And so our churches as well, churches and individuals who support missionaries and maybe are sending churches of missionaries in Europe, how would you encourage them in that regard?
Well, I would say that for the missionaries that it is going to take a long time. Don't be discouraged by that. Don't think that you're failing because you're not having the numbers that you want to have. It's not about numbers really anyway. It's about being obedient to the Lord and just following and speaking to the person that he's telling you to speak to. It's the same here. Everything that we do, we should be doing it in obedience to the Lord. And so just continue. I want to encourage them to continue and being faithful. And it was very encouraging to me to see so many that had been on the field for a very long time.
Yes.
And so that was encouraging. And so for the younger ones, keep going. For churches, I would say, try and encourage your missionaries. And especially if you're supporting missionaries that are in these European countries, then send them notes and tell them how much you appreciate them. Give them a call. Communicate with them that you're praying for them. And I know for me, it has changed the way that I pray for missionaries in the European countries. I'm more fervent in praying that they would be able to win souls and that they would be able to keep going. Just watching how difficult it was and how hard it was. So, but I know that God is still calling people, and so that's a wonderful thing, and it's exciting. I don't think that it's impossible. It's an impossible job because if God calls us to it, then He's going to do the work.
He's going to
He'll make it happen. So, I think that that's just wherever you're asked to go, then we just be obedient and continue to do that. And I think that God will bless it, So.
Yeah. And you're so right. God is still calling. And that's what we're all about here with the 938 Challenge and on the 938 podcast. Considering the fact that God is still calling people into his ministry. And, I'm going to echo the voiceover of Gail Gritz. It was all in that video, that the opportunities that are there currently in European missions. It's a potentially fruitful field. But visiting with our missionaries, honestly, many of them are on the other side of their ministry, and they're looking at they're looking for workers to come behind
and fill their shoes. Yeah.
And so I do firmly believe that God is currently right now calling individuals, couples, to come and fill their shoes and take their place. And so that's what we're praying for, that they would say yes. Right. And God would continue to raise up more laborers to fulfill the call in their lives that God has to go into those fields that are ripe and ready for harvest, and that's European missions. And so would you join us? Would you join us in praying that prayer that God would continue to not only call, because he's doing that, he's continuously still calling those into his work, into his ministry, but that those that feel the tap of the Holy Spirit on their shoulder, that they would say yes. Would you join us in that prayer? And we will work toward that end. We are here to serve not only our missionaries who are currently in the field, but to serve those who feel like God might be calling them into those fields that are ripe. So if that's you, we invite you to just reach out to us at bbfimissions.com or give us a call, and we would be happy to walk you down that path and see how we can help you answer God's call on your life. Michelle, thanks for joining me.
Sure.
This has been fun. And I sure appreciate you taking time to share our experience
Thank you for the
on our
opportunity.
recent trip. Thank you so much for joining us today. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast on all your social media platforms. God bless you so much. And once again, thanks for being part of the 938 Challenge.